I think these might be the best chocolate chip cookies I've ever had. In my last video, I followed the history and I made cakes that were just sweetened with honey. But when I first thought of this, back when I tasted that browned butter for the first time, my mind went to cookies. And so that's what I'm going to do in this video. Specifically, I'm going to make chocolate chip cookies, but I've got to decide what type of chocolate chip cookies I'm going to make, because there are a couple different types. You've got your thin and crispy, your soft and chewy, your light and cakey. When I think about what makes a really great chocolate chip cookie, my mind always goes to those crisp on the outside, gooey on the inside, with a little bit of cakiness, style chocolate chip cookies that became so popular when Levain cookies became a viral sensation. But how do we make such a cookie? The Levain style cookie recipes all seem to follow a 2-2-3 ratio. That is 2 parts sugar, in this case going to be honey, 2 parts fat, and then 3 parts flour. We already know that honey is going to be our sweetener, so we need to look at the other major components. For flour, we're going to use plain flour to give us that crisp outside texture, but we're also going to combine that with some cake flour, which will give us the cakiness we're looking for. I'm also going to throw in dehydrated milk because that will also boost that cakey feel. For fat, we're going to use eggs and butter, but I'm going to brown some of the butter to bring out some of those toffee, nutty flavors. And that's going to boost some of the sweetness as well because the lactose is going to be caramelized. Finally, the mix-ins. Usually people add walnuts when they're going to add nuts to their chocolate chip cookies, but in this case I'm going to use hazelnuts. And then that brings us to our chocolate. In this case, we're actually going to need to sweeten our own chocolate because I can't use a chocolate that's been sweetened with sugar. And here we have our first major obstacle with using honey. Chocolate is oil-based and honey is water-based, so they shouldn't really be able to mix. But I'm going to give it a try and see what I come up with. I break up the chocolate and add it to a metal bowl, along with the honey. I'm going to cook this over a simmering pot of water until it reaches a smooth texture. Once I reach 122 degrees Fahrenheit, I can pour out 2/3 of the melted chocolate onto a marble slab and spread it out to help it cool. Spreading out the chocolate's going to cool it, and then you bring it back together to make sure it's a uniform temperature. Once it reaches 82 degrees, I'm going to add the rest of the chocolate to the slab and mix it together until it reaches 86 to 88 degrees Fahrenheit. Then bring all the chocolate together and wait for it to cool. Once it's cooled, I'm going to chop it up into chunks and save it for later. The next big obstacle I've got to face is trying to get the honey to work as sugar. And while I was researching using honey in place of sugar, I saw this video made about 9 years ago making honey sugar. So I think that's going to be the key to making these cookies work. I'm taking honey and I'm spreading it out between 2 sheet pans. I'm trying to make sure it's as thin as possible so I can dehydrate it and make it into sugar. After several hours, it came out as this leathery texture that broke apart. So I took the bigger pieces and shook them in between 2 pans to try and get them to break up. And I got some of the bigger pieces to break up into smaller pieces, but it's still not the size that we need. So I took some of the honey sugar, put it in a bag, and crushed it with a hammer. And when that didn't work, I took my coffee grinder and tried to pass it through that. It didn't work. Even if it had worked, I don't think I could have recommended doing this. It took me about 10 hours to get to this point, and I really didn't have much to show for it. And it's just too much work to do for a home cook. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to whip the honey and add the butter in and see if it will come together. I've gathered together the honey, eggs, butter, and dehydrated milk. And I'm going to whip the honey until it becomes light in color and has a creamy texture. Then I'll add my butter and whip it till it's light and airy. Then in with the eggs and dehydrated milk and whip it until it's combined. Next, I'm going to get my flour, salt, and baking soda and mix them all together. Then into the bowl with the butter, eggs, and honey mixture. And finally, I'm going to stir in my chocolate and hazelnuts. Once the dough comes together, put it in the refrigerator for half an hour. Then take it out and form it into 8 even-sized balls. Then into the freezer for 2 hours. After the 2 hours, take them out of the freezer. I'm rolling the cookie dough in my hands to make sure it's firmed up. Then onto a baking tray and into the oven. Chocolate chip cookies tend to go one of two ways. They either overwhelm you with chocolate flavor, or they underdeliver. These chocolate chip cookies scream chocolate, but don't overwhelm you. And the secret to that is the honey. Turns out that honey is in fact a secret ingredient when it comes to sweetening chocolate. Chocolatiers all over the world use honey with chocolate because they know the combination goes so well. If you decide to make these chocolate chip cookies, I absolutely recommend you sweeten your own chocolate with honey, like I did in this video. And if you liked these, then you're going to like this next video.